Are you exhausted from doing everything alone? From watching others rise because they had mentors, families, networks, shortcuts, while you had nothing, no guidance, no protection, no one to call when things collapsed? And you keep asking yourself, quietly, almost ashamed, how am I supposed to succeed like this? Stay with me, because today I will show you how zero support is not a disadvantage, but the raw material of a different kind of power. I am Dr. Adam. This is Psychology Unlocked. Listen slowly. Most people fail long before they fail externally. They fail internally when they realize no one is coming. No encouragement, no safety net. No one saying you are doing great, keep going. Just silence. Cold silence. And that silence hurts more than rejection. Because rejection at least acknowledges your existence. When there is zero support, your mind starts doing something dangerous. It begins to negotiate with weakness. Maybe I should be more realistic. Maybe this dream is too much. Maybe people like me are not meant to win. That inner dialogue is not random. It is a psychological response to social abandonment. Human beings are wired for tribe, for mirrors, for validation. Remove that, and most collapse. But Machiavelli understood something that modern psychology only recently confirmed. Power is not built in comfort. Power is built in isolation. When no one supports you, you are forced to confront reality without anesthesia. No applause to distort feedback. No praise to soften mistakes. No one to blame when things go wrong. Just cause and effect. And that is brutal, but clean. Here is the first principle you must understand if you want to succeed with zero support. You must stop expecting emotional fairness from life. Life is not unfair. It is indifferent. And the faster your nervous system accepts this, the faster your psychology stabilizes. Most people waste years emotionally reacting to the absence of help. They personalize it. They internalize it. What is wrong with me? Why them and not me? This creates learned helplessness, a state where the mind stops initiating action because it expects no reward. Machiavelli would call this a fatal weakness. Not because it feels bad, but because it makes you predictable. And predictable men are controllable. When you expect support, you behave in ways that seek approval. You soften your edge. You hesitate. You over-explain. But when you expect nothing, something changes. Your decisions become quieter, colder, more precise. You stop announcing your plans. You stop seeking validation before acting. You move first, you adjust later. Psychology shows us that expectation shapes perception. If you expect help, you see obstacles as injustices. If you expect nothing, you see obstacles as data. And data is power. This is where most people misunderstand Machiavelli. They think he taught cruelty. He taught clarity. Clarity about human nature. Clarity about motivation. Clarity about how systems actually work, not how we wish they worked. When no one supports you, you are forced to build internal authority. This is not confidence. Confidence still needs feedback. This is self-legitimacy. The ability to say, I act because I decided, not because someone agreed. This rewires your psychology. Your dopamine stops depending on praise. Your motivation stops depending on external reward. You begin operating from a closed circuit. And closed circuits are resilient. Here is something uncomfortable. People with support often develop fragile ambition. They chase goals that are socially admired, not strategically sound. They fear disappointing others. They fear looking foolish. You have no such burden. Zero support removes social friction. No one to impress, no one to reassure. This is why many historically powerful figures emerged from neglect, exile, or abandonment. Not because suffering is noble, but because isolation sharpens perception. When you walk alone, you notice patterns others miss. You study human behavior not out of curiosity, but survival. This is applied psychology. You learn who helps only when it benefits them. You learn who disappears when you stop providing value. You learn how power really circulates. Machiavelli would say, this knowledge is worth more than loyalty. Because loyalty often expires. Knowledge compounds. At this stage, Something subtle must happen in your mind. You must detach your self-worth from being chosen. Chosen by mentors, chosen by systems, chosen by society. You were not chosen. Good. Because being chosen creates dependency. Being unchosen creates autonomy. Autonomy is the foundation of strategic life design. Without it, every success is borrowed. With it, even small wins are owned. This is why I tell my patients, and yes, this is clinical psychology, not motivation, if you feel invisible, stop trying to be seen. Start becoming undeniable. Undeniable does not mean loud, it means structurally necessary. You build skills that solve problems. You position yourself where outcomes depend on you, not approval, not permission. Outcome. This is Machiavellian psychology in its purest form. Remove emotion from expectation. Remove fairness from planning. Remove validation from movement. And something strange happens. The loneliness changes texture. It stops feeling like rejection. It starts feeling like freedom. Freedom to fail quietly. Freedom to pivot without explanation. Freedom to build in shadows. Most people cannot tolerate this phase. Their nervous system screams for reassurance, for signs, for someone to say, you are on the right path. You must learn to walk without signs. This is not romantic. It is neurological training. You are teaching your brain to act without immediate reward. This is delayed gratification at an extreme level. An extreme delayed gratification produces disproportionate power. Right now, if no one believes in you. Good. Belief is a weak fuel. It burns fast. Structure lasts. In the next phase, we will talk about how to construct internal discipline when no one is watching, and why this is where most self-made individuals either break or become dangerous in the most controlled sense of the word. Stay calm. Slow your breathing. You are not behind. You are unburdened. Most people think the hardest part of having zero support is loneliness. It is not. The hardest part is the moment your mind realizes no one is watching. No one will praise you for discipline. No one will punish you for laziness. No one will notice whether you rise or decay. And in that moment, psychology becomes destiny. Because when external pressure disappears, only internal structure remains. This is where most people collapse quietly. They tell themselves comforting lies. I will start tomorrow. I deserve rest. No one helped me anyway. And slowly their standards erode. Machiavelli understood this danger deeply. When there is no external authority, the individual must become his own sovereign, or become a subject to impulse. There is no middle state. Psychology calls this self-regulation. But that term is too gentle. What we are talking about is internal law. Rules that apply even when breaking them has no visible consequence, especially then. Here is the second principle of succeeding with zero support. You must replace motivation with ritual. Motivation is emotional. It fluctuates. It responds to encouragement. You have none of that. Ritual is mechanical, cold, repeatable. It functions even when you feel nothing. When Machiavelli wrote about discipline, he did not mean enthusiasm. He meant consistency without witnesses. This is where the nervous system is trained. Every time you act despite apathy, your brain learns something terrifyingly powerful. Action does not require emotion. This breaks a core illusion most people live by. They believe they must feel ready before acting. You will never feel ready, because readiness is socially reinforced. Without support, you must act while emotionally unfinished, while uncertain, while tired, while doubting yourself. And this forges a different psychology, one that does not wait for alignment, one that creates alignment through movement. This is not productivity advice. This is identity engineering. Your brain tracks what you do more than what you think. When you show up daily, without applause, without feedback, without encouragement, your self-image shifts. Not dramatically, quietly. You stop seeing yourself as someone who hopes. You begin seeing yourself as someone who executes. That identity is rare and dangerous in the strategic sense. Now let us talk about something uncomfortable. Resentment. Zero support breeds resentment if left unchecked. You see others receiving help, opportunities, second chances. And your mind whispers, this is unfair. Psychologically, resentment feels justified. Strategically, It is poison. Machiavelli warned against emotional debts, the belief that the world owes you because you suffered. This belief weakens perception. You begin interpreting events through moral judgment instead of utility. You ask, is this right? Instead of, does this work? And while you debate ethics internally, others move. Here is the mental shift. Your hardship is not a moral argument. It is a training environment. And training environments are not fair. They are effective. When you accept this, resentment dissolves into focus. You stop comparing timelines. You stop measuring effort versus reward. You measure only leverage. Where does one action produce multiple outcomes? This is pure psychology. The brain, under stress, seeks shortcuts. If guided properly, it develops efficiency. If not, it develops bitterness. Most people choose bitterness unconsciously. They use it as an emotional companion. At least anger feels like company. But bitterness keeps you psychologically dependent on what you claim to reject. You are still oriented toward them. Their approval, their injustice, their attention. Power begins when attention turns inward. Not emotionally, but structurally. You audit your time, your energy, your habits. Not with kindness, with neutrality. This works. This wastes time. This weakens me. No drama. No story. This is Machiavellian minimalism. Remove everything that does not contribute to outcome. This includes people, routines, beliefs, especially beliefs. One belief must die here. The belief that success will feel good while it is happening. It will not. It will feel empty, repetitive, often meaningless. Meaning comes later, sometimes much later. Psychology confirms this. The brain assigns meaning retroactively. While you are building alone, there is only process. If you wait for meaning, you will stop. This is why zero-support individuals must develop a tolerance for psychological flatness. No highs, no praise, no celebration. Just quiet, forward motion. This is not depression. It is emotional neutrality. A state where you are not pulled by emotion, positive or negative. From this state, precision emerges. Now something subtle happens. Because you have no audience, you stop performing. You stop crafting narratives about yourself. You stop exaggerating progress. You stop lying to maintain identity. This is uncomfortable. But it produces accuracy. And accuracy is the root of real power. You know exactly where you stand. Not where you pretend to stand. Not where you hope to stand. Where you stand. Most people avoid this clarity. It threatens their self-image. You cannot afford that luxury. Your psychology must prioritize truth over comfort, even when the truth is disappointing. Especially then. This phase feels slow, painfully slow. Others seem to leap ahead. Remember this. Speed without structure collapses. Structure without speed compound. You are building structure. Invisible. Uncelebrated. But once formed, it does not depend on circumstances. In the next phase, we will confront something even harder. How to operate socially without support, without becoming bitter, submissive, or desperate. How to engage with others from a position of internal power, even when you still appear invisible. This is where Machiavellian psychology becomes externalized. Remain steady. Do not rush. You are still building the machine. When you move through the world with zero support, social interaction becomes dangerous terrain, because every human instinct inside you wants one of two extremes. To submit, hoping someone finally approves of you, or to harden, rejecting everyone before they can reject you. Both are psychological traps. Machiavelli warned about this indirectly, but modern psychology explains it clearly. When a person lacks social backing, their nervous system becomes hypervigilant. Every interaction feels like a test. Every conversation feels loaded. You start scanning faces for signals. Respect, dismissal, opportunity, threat. If unchecked, this turns into either people-pleasing or isolation. Neither leads to power. The third principle of succeeding with zero support is this. You must learn strategic social neutrality. Not warmth, not hostility. Neutrality. Neutrality confuses most people because they equate it with weakness. It is not. Neutrality is control over emotional display. It means you do not reveal need, you do not reveal resentment, you do not reveal ambition. You reveal competence when necessary. This is where Machiavellian psychology intersects with emotional regulation. People who lack support often over-explain themselves. They justify choices. They share struggles too early. They seek understanding instead of leverage. This is unconscious. They are trying to compensate for invisibility by increasing transparency. But transparency without power invites exploitation. When you explain your hardship, people may sympathize briefly. Then they categorize you as someone struggling, as someone behind, as someone needy. And categories are hard to escape. Machiavelli understood categorization intuitively. Once a perception stabilizes, changing it requires disproportionate force. So you do not rush to be understood. You let outcomes speak. You let consistency shape reputation. This requires patience that feels unnatural, especially when you have suffered quietly for years. But patience here is not passive. It is calculated delay. You observe before you engage. You study how power flows in the room, who speaks without being interrupted, who listens when others talk, who controls resources, who controls narrative. This is applied psychology, not paranoia. People who succeed alone learn to read environments quickly because they cannot afford mistakes. They cannot rely on forgiveness or second chances. So they move carefully. This is not fear. This is economy of action. When you finally speak, you are concise. When you act, you are decisive. This contrast creates psychological weight. People begin to lean in, not because you demand attention, but because you do not need it. Need repels, independence attracts. Here is the uncomfortable truth. Most social spaces reward predictability, not authenticity. If you enter emotionally raw, you disrupt comfort. If you enter neutral, you blend, until you choose not to. This gives you timing, and timing is power. You reveal value gradually. Skill here, insight there, reliability over time. No grand announcement. People trust what is consistent, not what is intense, especially in environments driven by status and scarcity. Zero support teaches you this the hard way, because intensity without backing isolates you further. Now, let us address something dangerous: the fantasy of revenge. When you have been overlooked, ignored, underestimated, the mind imagines future recognition. One day they will see. One day they will regret. This fantasy is seductive and lethal because it keeps your psychology tied to their perception. Machiavelli would call this emotional dependency. Modern psychology calls it external locus of evaluation. Your internal state depends on future validation. This delays action. You begin optimizing for impact instead of effectiveness. You choose dramatic moves over sustainable ones. Revenge is noisy. Power is quiet. If you notice yourself rehearsing speeches in your head, imagining confrontations, imagining vindication, stop. That energy is leaking. Redirect it into construction. Systems, skills, assets. Things that do not argue back. Things that grow while you sleep. This is how you sever psychological ties to the past. Not through forgiveness, through irrelevance. Now, something subtle but critical happens. As you stop seeking approval, people test you. They push boundaries. They probe weaknesses. They offer conditional support. Help, but with strings. Be careful here. Support that arrives after you no longer need it often comes with control. Machiavelli warned against gifts that create obligation. Psychology confirms this. Reciprocity bias is powerful. People feel compelled to repay, even when the cost is autonomous. So you accept help selectively, not emotionally, strategically. You ask yourself one question: does this reduce my dependence or increase it? If it increases dependence, it is not help. It is leverage disguised as kindness. This does not mean you reject everyone. It means you remain sovereign internally. You appreciate. You do not attach. Gratitude without submission. This balance is rare, but it is the hallmark of those who rose alone and stayed free. At this stage, something changes socially. People begin to sense that you are not desperate, not bitter, not eager, just stable. Stability is magnetic. In a chaotic world, emotional stability signals competence, even before results are visible. This is why many opportunities arrive late, but arrive clean. No pity, no rescue, just recognition of utility. This is the only kind of recognition that lasts. In the next phase, we will confront the final and most difficult transformation. What happens when success begins to appear, and how to protect your psychology from corruption, arrogance, or collapse when the support you never had suddenly shows up. This is where many self-made individuals lose themselves. Remain grounded. You are closer than you think. There is a moment that almost no one warns you about. It is not the moment you fail. You already know how to survive that. It is the moment things start to work, quietly at first. A small win, a signal, a door that opens without you pushing, and suddenly, the world feels different. People return, interest appears, support materializes out of nowhere, and this is where the final danger lives. Because success after zero support creates psychological distortion. Machiavelli understood this better than most. He warned not about poverty, but about sudden elevation. When the environment changes faster than the identity, instability follows. Here is the final principle. You must not let delayed support rewrite your self-perception. When people begin to notice you, your mind is tempted to revise history. Maybe I was always valued. Maybe they believed in me all along. Maybe I needed them. This is how autonomy dissolves. Psychology calls this reattachment. After long deprivation, the brain craves belonging intensely. It wants relief. And relief can make you careless. You start explaining yourself again. You soften boundaries. You accept opinions you once ignored. Not because they are right, but because they are present. This is where many self-made individuals lose their edge. They mistake attention for alignment. Support does not mean understanding. Interest does not mean loyalty. Often it simply means you are now useful. This is not cynical. It is accurate, and accuracy protects you. You must preserve the internal architecture that carried you through isolation, the rituals, the neutrality, the discipline without witnesses. Because the moment praise enters, discipline weakens if it was never internalized. You cannot afford to outsource motivation now, not after coming this far. Here is something counterintuitive. Success does not cure loneliness. It changes its shape. Instead of being alone in silence, you are alone among people. And if your psychology is not grounded, this creates identity confusion. Who am I now that I am seen? The answer must be simple. You are the same operator, same standards, same restraint, same refusal to depend emotionally. The world did not change you. Circumstances shifted. That distinction matters. This is why Machiavellian psychology emphasizes consistency of character, not morality. Consistency. When behavior changes with attention, power leaks. People sense instability. They may not articulate it, but they feel it. And they respond by testing you. More demands, more opinions, more expectations. If you bend here, you will resent them later. So you must do something quietly radical. Treat support as optional, appreciated, but not required. You listen, but you decide. You collaborate, but you lead yourself. This preserves internal sovereignty, and sovereignty is the final form of freedom. Now let us talk about arrogance, another common collapse. After years of neglect, recognition feels intoxicating. The mind swings to the opposite extreme. I did this alone. I do not need anyone. I am above them. This is also a trap. Isolation taught you independence, not superiority. Arrogance blinds perception. You stop listening. You stop adjusting. You mistake stubbornness for strength. Machiavelli warned that rulers fall not from enemies, but from rigidity. Psychology agrees. Cognitive flexibility predicts long-term success more than intelligence. So you remain open without becoming dependent. Firm without becoming brittle. This balance is subtle. It requires self-observation. You watch your reactions. Do I feel offended by feedback? Do I crave admiration? Do I fear losing attention? These signals tell you when ego is replacing structure. Structure must always come first, because structure survives moods. Finally, something must be said clearly. If you succeeded with zero support, do not become a savior. Do not rush to rescue others to rewrite your story. Helping others is noble, but compulsive helping is unresolved pain. It is an attempt to retroactively receive what you never got. This creates hidden resentment. You give, hoping to be needed. And when gratitude fades, bitterness returns. So you help selectively, from abundance, not from hunger. You do not prove worth through sacrifice. You honor worth through boundaries. This is psychological maturity. At this stage, your relationship with support becomes clean. You neither seek it nor reject it. You use it as a tool, not an identity. And this is the final transformation. You stop seeing yourself as someone who survived alone. You see yourself as someone who can operate in any condition, with support, without it, against resistance, inside uncertainty. This is not toughness. This is adaptability, the highest form of power Machiavelli described. And psychology confirms it. The most resilient minds are not those who are protected, but those who learn to self-regulate under absence. If you are still alone right now, remember this. You are not lacking something essential. You are building something rare, something that cannot be taught, cannot be gifted, cannot be transferred. Internal command. And once you have it, support becomes optional, success becomes repeatable, and your psychology becomes unbreakable. This is Psychology Unlocked. Move slowly, think clearly, and never forget. You did not need permission to begin.